Now we're talking about parenting. So, because this is a football podcast and we've already talked playoffs anyway, I figured the first couple questions here we'll stick to playoffs. Whatever, I'm done with this with football. It's one of those nights, I guess. So we'll just jump right into the first question. And Coach Rid, we're going to start with you tonight because you have the most experience with 28 years of coaching, and I think most of them were with kids, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, how did being a father, how did that affect you as a coach?
Just trying to build those relationships and understand that as a coach, my role extended far beyond the X's and O's of being a football coach. There's so many things that children and kids need as far as mentorship and guidance and just somebody that cares about them. And I think that my wife and I raising our kids, they were I don't know if they were the center of our universe, but they weren't very far away from the center. And we loved having kids, loved raising our boys, and that just being a teacher and coach is kind of an extension of that mentality for me. And some kids weren't fortunate as I was to have parents at home that invested in me, and that's just kind of my way of paying it forward as a teacher and a coach. The upbringing I got from my folks, as well as the teachers and coaches that I had. Just we as coaches are thieves, and we steal things from the good ones that we love and remember, and that's all I've done. The guidance and guideposts that I had and the different people along the way. I just tried to emulate what they did for me.
Yeah, the kids that need somebody, that's a big one. And we'll talk way more about that, I'm sure, tonight, and we'll give Joe a moment here, but that's something that stuck out from the beginning, is that, like, I know what my kids are getting at home. And Beckett was 2 or something. I think he turned 2 during my first season, and I saw a lot of kids that didn't have that kind of love and support. So that is a really big one. That's something that maybe coaches don't realize until they have kids. Joe, we're a year and a half in almost, right? Year and a quarter.
Year and a quarter. Yeah.
We'll go year and a quarter. I was trying to make him older than he is.
Year and a quarter. Almost a year and a third, I guess. As the time this comes out.
Changes in the way that you coach now, or do you see anything different in yourself or even other coaches that are fathers?
So, Coach, you have 3 boys. Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Daniel, you have 2 boys.
That's correct.
I have 1 boy. So we're not a very good panel because we missed.
No girls.
I was always told coaches always have girls. And my early coaching career, all of my first 2 head coaches, not my very first head coach, my first head coach I worked for, extended period of time, 2 girls. Next head coach had 1 girl. I've friends had girls and girls and girls. Now the head coach that I work for now has 2 boys. But we don't have a lot of heavy girl dad representation, unfortunately. So, or fortunately, I don't know how that works. I mean, I was pretty pumped about it, but yeah, I was always told that we always have girls. Coaches always have girls. So I guess not.
We've broken the mold.
We don't have any insight on like what to do when there's like a ballet recital on a Friday night, like how to navigate that, I guess.
That's true.
No, so my son was born in July of 2022, which was, very poor planning, and planning was out the window for us. We had a difficult time getting there, which is why I'm so old with a 1-year-old. Had difficult pregnancy, so all of that kind of I didn't care about football very much during that time, to be quite honest. And then when we had, a healthy boy, was pretty excited. And it did line up, at least, that my wife was on her maternity leave for most of the season. And we did not have to worry about that until the last week or 2 of the season. I can't remember exactly how it lined up. And what we ended up doing, for those who have not been in this environment, and I don't know if it's this way everywhere, but I think it is dang near impossible. I think a lot of daycares shut down during COVID. It is daggone near impossible, especially and also with the the difficulty of hiring people to work, and the increase in wages. It's difficult for the daycares that are remaining to hire somebody, to hire them at a wage that they'll stay. And when you have young kids, the numbers required are very high. So in other words, you have to have like one daycare person per like 2 infants or something like that. So daycare was hard. We couldn't get into daycare. Daycare wasn't hard. We couldn't get into a daycare. That left us with hiring a nanny, because we had to. And I have to work. Wife has to work. Like that. There's a lot of things that go into that, and that was both expensive and difficult. What we ended up doing was I watch our son to keep the kind of prices kind of down. I watch our son in the mornings till about 10 or 10:30, and then nanny comes in. We argue back and forth whether we went through 4 or 5 nannies in the first 4 months of hiring. So got through the end of the first football season, told my head coach, like, I don't know if this is going to happen. I know it's not going to be full time. Went back and forth, and I was like, I'm off season. Don't look for me. I just get 3 hours, the 3 hours of watching my son in the mornings. That's my coach time, right? I've lost it. But finally in March, we hired someone who stuck, and schedule remains the same. So I'm part-time. I go like 1 day a week. That's probably the biggest impact, is that in order to now, luckily, because of my job, I could be flexible in my schedule and say, all right, from 8 to 11, I got that. Now, also, by the way, luckily, my son sleeps till 8. All right. I know that's not normal. My son sleeps till 8. And so 8 to 11 is I'm a daddy daycare, right? So that's fortunate for me that I was able to be that flexible, and move my schedule around. So very lucky for that. And it's worked out this season. Basically doing 1 day a week practice, 1 or 2 days, depending on the situation, but mostly 1 day a week, and then game times on Friday nights and Thursday nights, because we've all got Thursday. I don't know if we all do, but most of us, I think, have Thursday night games now because of the official shortages, or Saturdays, whatever it is. Yeah, got it.
Both of
Finally.
us.
So I mean, it was hard in this environment of I don't know if daycare, I don't know what you went through with daycare, or there were times where we didn't have anything, and I'm just like, I got the kid all day because the nanny spaced out, and we got to find a new one. In the meantime, there's no daycare, and there's no we luckily have had some friends to help and things along that way that have helped out, but we don't have family here. We can't just drop them off at Meemaw's. That's not an option for us. So that made it difficult. And it made football just like, I'll do football when I can. So I guess that's for me, like with a 1.25-year-old. That's for me was the biggest thing, was just like football had to take a back seat. And I'm okay with, I'm okay with that, but that was, it had to.
So I know, like, the amount of time that I can imagine me spending at the office in season without kids, I imagine would be like some ridiculous number, because with kids, because I started coaching, I already had a 2-year-old. So I knew, and maybe that first year I probably stayed too long anyway. Not too long after I started the podcasting with you and kind of learned your thoughts of time management and stop wasting assistant coaches' time, and don't be mad when they get done with practice and leave, right? They got stuff to do.
Yep.
I quickly put that into effect, because, and that stuff can just eat up all your time, right? Just staying at the office. Especially, I've unfortunately had almost an hour drive every place I've coached. So if practice is over at 5:30, 6:30, 7 o'clock, whatever, like, it's still going to be dark when I get home. if I don't go right now. So I think that's a big effect it's kind of had on my coaching is I've never been the guy to just sit around and BS. And maybe that's hurt me. I don't know. You know, some of the coaches sometimes I feel like I get stuck on the outside just because I'm not the guy that'll sit around and talk until 9 o'clock at night. Um, but also, I think it's made me better at practice management, at talking to the kids and what I'm giving to them because it's like value yourself, value your time, be intentional with it, and then go home. Like if it's homework or video games or date night or whatever, be intentional with that stuff, and then go on. Also started teaching some leadership school for the military about that same time. It's very time based, so all of those are kind of affecting my timeline. Another thing is you quickly learn, and I think in season more than anything, you quickly learn what your coaching staff and your administration's really like because you have one of those days. Babysitter's sick. You think it's bad enough you have one. Now think or you can't find one. But if you have one and you're planning on using them and they're like, just kidding, we all called in sick.
Yep.
I mean,
that happens here, but I'm just stuck here.
Right.
It ruins the entire workday plan. Yes. But
Beckett,
it does happen here. Yeah.
Beckett has been to 3 out of my 4 schools. And, it's most of the time that's not an issue. Some schools do frown upon it, and I've actually been sent home before. Like, nope, you got to take sick days if your babysitter's sick. That's just how it works. And then I've had times that Beckett spent a week in learning biology 1 down at Stillwell. So that's kind of worked. But the first staff I was on, his kids were there all the time. Like the head coach had 3 kids, and they were always there. So I knew that was going to be a good fit if we'd ever gotten there. And then last year with Coach Collins down at Stillwell, like I told him, I was like, man, look, I may have to bring the kids. He's like, do it. That's fine. And you don't really believe that, right, until that first day because you don't want to be – you're at practice. You got stuff to do. You hate to be chasing your own son around. But, he was very, very cool with it. So you quickly kind of learn just how family-oriented your staff is and your admin. So I've also seen coaches in their discipline. And I don't know, you talked about having girls and boys, and Coach Terry had 2 girls and maybe he had 2 boys and a girl. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He had a girl for sure. And he was the strictest disciplinarian I have seen in coaching yet. And I don't know if that was to keep the girl in line because she was the oldest. So maybe like he just, I don't know. But all the rest of us, it seems like having kids has made us a little softer, a little more understanding of like, kids do dumb stuff, right? And their brains aren't developed. Even when we have them as 14-year-olds to 8-year-olds, their brains still aren't developed. They're going to do dumb things. And you maybe learn that lesson when it's your kid and you're like, I know I raised you right. And you're still doing really dumb stuff. So it makes you maybe a little more, I can kind of brush that stuff off a little more than other coaches and just be like, they're kids. They're going to say stupid stuff. They're going to put stupid stuff on social media. We have to coach them and educate them, but just being mad at them for a week or taking playing time or something, it's maybe made me look at discipline a little bit different.
And it makes me excited for you guys. And maybe it's the fact of the time that we live in as far as the coaches and how they are able to prioritize family time. And Coach Daniel, it's admirable that you're able to, be with your kid in the morning. And that's different from when I started way back, as a young coach, and my wife was still in college. I was coaching football, basketball, and track at a highly successful school. So, I was coaching from August to May, and we were in the finals in football and state tournament in basketball. And, I was an absentee parent for the most part. My wife did so much at that time, raising our 2 youngest. And, I just think it's so neat that you can put your priorities in order and still be successful as a coach and understand how to manage your time. And, back in the day, guys spent time at the field house and spent time on the weekends just because that was the norm and that was the expectation. And we're going to do it because the guy 10 miles down the road does it. And if we're not preparing the same way, then we're going to get behind and all that mentality. But there are different ways, there are better ways. And, just the fact that, we can balance the opportunity to be great fathers for our kids and leaders in our family, and still provide the things as a coach to be competitive on the field and provide those support, services and things for our students and athletes as a teacher. So, what you guys are doing is awesome. And I'm excited about the balance that seems that you guys are able to strike as dads and coaches.
There's a lot of things that are available to us that weren't, I started coaching in 2002. I was at least past the projector, but there's one VHS tape, and yeah, you can make a copy, but that copy degrades, and that copy degrades. Generally, we got our one VHS tape, and you came in on Saturday morning and you watched it, and Saturday was an 8-hour day. Saturday was just another 8-hour day. And I've talked a lot. I don't work on Saturdays. I will go in and I will accept any huddle exchanges that are for our game film analysis. So that now I coached this past Saturday because we had a game rained out, but I got home and it was like, all right, I'll see the film, Sunday. Because normally Friday night I will watch the film, which also wasn't available to us. It wasn't or it was, but we would watch it as a team or as a staff. I remember that going back to my very first year and actually getting kicked out of the meeting because I was a JV coach and we weren't supposed to be in the varsity meeting. That's a whole different issue. But yeah, that after the game we would, because the camcorder had a VHS tape in it, and you'd take that out and you'd sit and you'd watch that until 2:00 in the morning, and you'd be back bleary-eyed and coffee in hand at 8 a.m. Somebody had to go make the exchange at 7 a.m. at a McDonald's in the middle of nowhere. It was halfway between, and you came in and that film got there and you watched that film. And we have the ability now, which I think it's funny, like you said, a lot of coaches have not realized that we have the ability now. I film practice with my iPhone. I film the offensive line from behind the offensive line. It is loaded up before I walk off the field, because as soon as the head coach comes up and everybody walks up to talk or they do conditioning, and I go upload, and it uploads over 5G, and by the time we get back into the field house, practice film is up. So I would take my offensive line, again, value their time, value my time, and say, hey, sit down, we're going to watch 7 minutes of film. And I would do that. I would actually plug my phone directly, and I wouldn't even wait for it to upload. And we would watch 7 minutes of whatever we saw, and then I'd go home and maybe tag the rest and take 20 minutes or something like that. But we have the ability now, and there's the number of coaches who haven't realized we have the ability to literally get those kids out the door and go home. And you can still get home, put your kid to bed, or be there when your kid goes to bed, sit on the couch with your wife, wait till she falls asleep, and then spend 30 minutes watching film. You can still do all of that work. We don't have to sit in the office to do it. And we don't have to be, like you said, the absentee dad. And there was a time when coaches held that. And there's a time when the coaches that I worked with, almost all of them, that was a badge of honor. My kids don't remember what I look like from August to November. And it's like, and even before I was a parent, I'm like, cool, but what if they did? Would that be better? I mean, and you're exactly what you're saying. That was just the mindset. It just was. So, I think it's really important that we realize. I was fortunate enough also, because if I had my son when I was 27, I can guarantee you nothing different. I would have, that would have been the way it was. But 20 years of coaching, and I'm like, and seeing all the things and working with all the coaches that I do, it's like, I'm not doing that. I can just go ahead and tell you. And like, is my kid going to be a proud? Like, I always dreamed of my kid being out at practice. Not right now. I don't need him sprinting out on the field and getting beamed with a football in his soft head right now, because he's out of his mind. And he's pretty fast. But as he gets a little older, being around at practice, being around and all the guys and all that sort of stuff, I think is awesome. But yeah, absolutely. It used to be the way that it is, and I'm glad that it doesn't have to be. And I hope that we don't continue falling into that.
Before we move on to the next one, the next question is be how to handle having your child on the team. I was recently listening to Kenny Spigner, which me and Coach Ridley both know. He does a little podcast here in Oklahoma, and he talks to all the coaches. And he did one with his wife and a couple of other wives from the Velma. I think they're all at Velma. They may be different. I don't know. And he just kind of talked to them about like the other side of the coin, right? What are the wives thinking at home? And you can just feel it seemed to me they just had like that relief of the way it's modernized, and even kids at practice, kids out painting the field, like who cares? Your 5-year-old's here and he wants to kick a football around. No one cares. And that's good because you've been able to balance that work and home life and mingle. The family can meet the other coaches and their kids. And now guess what? You've kind of got a babysitter, because they can all run off and jump under the bleachers and play and do whatever they want to do. And you can get stuff done and be around other adults. So the world is definitely changing to the point that like, I'm okay if Beckett grows up or Liam, either one, and they say, hey, I want to be a coach. Financially, God, I wish they would do something else, but at least I know they're not getting paid absolutely nothing and not being there for their family at the same time. So at least things are changing in that perspective. All right.
It was always, I'm sorry. It was always great to have kids at practice because, we could use that as teachable moments for our kids. We never allowed profanity on the field with our kids, and our coaches didn't. And, because we didn't want, the little ones hearing that and emulating what we were doing. So we could, reinforce positive behaviors in our players and proper, gentlemanly conduct or whatever, however you want to look at it. And, I think that's a great learning opportunity when those guys, look over and we've had situations before where the kids would, let one slip or whatever, and they'd self-police. They were, sorry about that, coach, or whatever. So, it's having kids, as long as they're not in harm's way, as Coach Daniel was saying, it's a plus. I think it's just a great.
Mine would actively try to put himself in harm's way.
That looks dangerous. That's Liam right now all the time.
Yeah.
Later for funny stories. So Coach Rid, we're gonna you'll probably go first on most of these tonight, being the man with all the kids. How did you handle, first of all, having a kid that did play football for you? And then after that, I want to talk about having a kid who chose not to play football for you. So let's start with the one that did. Like, what was that like in the atmosphere, the coaching atmosphere? Because we've all heard about daddy ball and coach's favorite and all that. So how did you kind of handle that?
Yeah. So my situation, my wife and I had children from previous relationships when we were married, and then we had a child together, 3 years after we got married. So we had yours, mine, and ours. And so my youngest son, I coached him all the way through his entire football career, from the time he was in junior high through high school. And, he wasn't in an extremely talented class. He was a skill position kid when he was younger. He was, I think it's really important for us as coaches to know our kids' personalities and kind of know what makes them tick, and just be the adult. And as long as you're reading the room and being the adult and making the decisions that put your kid in the best situation to be successful, then we're doing our job. But he was a super conscientious kid. He was a pleaser. He took everything hard. He wanted to be perfect. So, if I would have coached him how my middle son needed to be coached, it would have been a complete clash 24/7. It would have been something he and I both took home. So, I really tried throughout the course of Caden's career to not be his position coach. And, fortunately, as he grew up, he became an offensive defensive lineman, and I primarily coached receivers and secondary. So that wasn't a big deal. But as the head coach, if there was ever anything that my kid needed to know, I made sure and went and talked to his position coach to kind of relay that through an intermediary, so the message would be better received. If I would have, even a correction in a normal tone constructively from me to my son Caden, that may have been construed as an attack or undue criticism. And so I had a really great staff. Jake Melton was on staff, and Jake did a lot of the communication between Caden and myself. But he was a leader, good kid. ended up having a really fine career, was the third All-Stater in our school history at Lone Grove. But I really wasn't a hands-on coach with my son. And, when we got home, if there was something he wanted to talk about football wise, we'd talk about it, but it really wasn't, in a coach player relationship. It was more either just talking football in general, or I'm the dad. When we got home, I was the dad, and he was his behavior and all that stuff were good, so I never really had to get onto him. But I didn't do a lot of coaching with him, because I knew if I did, it would likely end poorly for both of us.
Caden was a stud, and he was a super good kid. I was lucky enough to I got to spend some time at OU with him. We had biology together because I was graduating, and it somehow failed the class that I was getting my degree in. Thanks for the Army. Anyway, super good kid, and I'm glad to see him be so successful. I did not know he had all stated. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. So I will have to text him later and tell him congratulations all these years later. But that's
Yeah,
really good.
he grew up and became a pharmacist, and lives in Kansas City, has a great job. But he was a hard charger, and he was his most harsh critic. And if I would have, piled on, that would have been the worst thing I could have done as coach or dad. So, I think it's really important to understand where your kids are coming from and give them what they need.
So you also had a son who chose not to play for you.
Well, hold on, before we
go ahead,
one
Joe.
question
Yep.
though, before we go on to that one. There's always the coach's kid, right? That the kid that knows like football beyond what everybody else in his class. Was that the case with him? And if so, was that something that, not that I mean, it's just from osmosis, or is it like being around it, or the coach's kid that like just understands football at a different level?
Yeah, he was really kind of a dichotomy, because he really didn't care much about football. We would watch OU football stuff together, but if you ask him who his favorite pro team was, he wouldn't even know half the teams in the NFL. And so he really wasn't a student of the game per se. But once he did it, he became successful. I think there's just such a social contract between your buddies. If you choose to play football, and you're out there with your friends, you're going to give your best to help them be successful and help the team be successful. So I think that was a big component of what he enjoyed in playing, is being with his friend group, and trying to help them by being the best he could be. And as far as the football knowledge and stuff, he was just so conscientious and studious that if you taught him, you better teach him the right way, because that's how he was going to do it. And we had a really smart group. They weren't just extremely talented, but his line group was just a bunch of smart kids they devised their UO line guys are amazing to me, and you get the most out of your kids. But they had calls, and they created their own language. So he had a lot of fun and enjoyment of just finding joy in the game, not making football the end all be all for him. He was a great student, had a lot of interest outside, but he probably wasn't the stereotypical coach's kid who just lived it, ate it, breathed it 24/7, because that's what dad did. And I didn't make it to where it was my end all be all at the end of the day. So I don't know if he modeled that from my attitude. I feel like I've got a identity outside of school or the football field too. So I don't know if that played into it or not, but we were all about football when we were doing football, and when we were at home, we were dad, son, doing our thing.
All right. So Jordan, your other son, who chose not to play ball for you. So it did for a few years, and then when he got to the varsity level, said, "Nah, I'm out. Not my thing." How did you handle that? What was that conversation like? Because to me, it seems like football coaches' kids are supposed to play football. I mean, if I had a daughter, I feel like she would have to suit up, and be on the field. So, kind of, how does that work?
Yeah, my oldest son, he played Pee Wee football as a little guy in Marlow, where we lived. And when we came to Lone Grove, he played throughout junior high and into his freshman year. And we had made the playoffs. It was just real quick story. My wife was in the bleachers. He was a freshman on our varsity team and wasn't getting any playing time. And we were in the playoffs, and it was cold. He was bundled up, had a hoodie on underneath his pads and everything. And my wife kept seeing him reaching down into his pants the whole night. And so, just to give you kind of a snapshot of how Jordan is, he had tucked away some Skittles down in his hip pads. So the whole night he was trying to stay warm, and he was scarfing down Skittles on the sideline. So we had a pretty good laugh about that. But Jordan played football, was a pretty good receiver. Didn't have a lot of fine motor skills, but was going to be a good player for us. He was about 6'1" as a freshman, ended up being 6'3" by the time he finished growing. And I had plans for him. But then after that football season, his freshman year, came to me. He said, "Pop, do you care if I don't play football next year?" And I said, "Of course, I don't care if you don't want to play football." And he goes, "Well, the only reason I would play is because you're the coach." And I said, "Well, then that's absolutely no reason to play." I said, if you're not happy playing, then go do something else." And man, he's such a talented kid in his own right. When he was a toddler, he had one of those Sesame Street xylophones, and he could play things that sounded like music when he was little. Picked up a guitar, could play by ear, play piano by ear, and so he has a whole different set of gifts than I have. And he got into music as he got older, and ended up becoming a pretty good golfer. Played on the Lone Grove varsity golf team, and that was his bag. And football's not for everybody. I even tell my players in season, this is hard work. It's not for everybody. And if it was, this whole locker room would be filled, and there wouldn't be any guys walking the hallway if it were easy. And Jordan had interests that lied elsewhere, and that was fine with me. And I don't know that we ever had any kind of awkward conversation or a harsh conversation about it. He knew I was cool with it after that, and I was fine.
I I think about coaches. So obviously, I want my kids to play it, and Beckett is 5, hates football, doesn't want to go to the OU games. He'll go because the family's going, but that's about it. Doesn't want it on TV. It's just not his thing. Sports aren't his thing. He wants to play video games and build and play trucks because he's 5. I understand his interest very much, so it can change. Liam, I can't get him to put football down. I introduced him to football, and he carries one around, and he goes to the games. And of course, at Owasso, we have a really nice wellness center that overlooks, so they can be indoors, and he can look through the glass and not be running like a lunatic through the stands because he would jump off the back of them. And he's up there talking about football and tackle and kick it and trying to kick a football. He's just turned 2, so I'm hoping that carries over. But like you said about Caden, right? He was not a football dude until he was, right? And he just happened to play. So who knows what's in the future. But I hope my kids will play. But I'm always worried about that stereotypical, the way that they get treated. Not necessarily how anybody's going to look at me, because if you're the coach, no one really says anything anyways. But I am worried about the way that kids are treated because they're the coach's son, right? We all know how kind of locker room talk can get out of control or whatever. Just kids are just peer reviewed as, yeah, you're the daddy's boy. That's why you're here. When realistically, Joe, you said it, a lot of times those kids know football. And so, yeah, they can come on as a freshman and be above the guys that are there. Maybe not physically, but man, if they're always in the right place and they can slow the play down and let someone else come help make the tackle, who cares if they are physically all there? So I worry about that as I've got a few years, at least 9, I would assume. But I always wonder about how that works out on the team.
I think that one of the things I want to mention that you brought up, Coach Ridley, was you never coached your kid in a position. That's always been a rule that most of the head coaches that I've worked for have tried to follow, not so much with their own kid, because, and to be fair, every head coach I've ever worked for had girls until the one right now, and his kids are not quite there yet. Now he's coaching them in like youth ball. But in general, if we were hiring a coach, especially a volunteer dad or something like that, they wouldn't even coach on the same level. We would always try to put kids not with their dad. And I remember very strongly, like my first experience with this, I had it in baseball and other sports too, where I felt like the coach's kid was getting a little bit more playing time or a little bit more rope than he probably should. And I had a really bad experience with it in middle school. Just a kind of miserable experience with it. And it was clearly this kid was getting more, more than he was better. Now I'll say that he was better than a lot of the kids, but he was getting more than, they got that feeling. But his dad was directly coaching him. And it's like, I feel like in general, that's a good rule to follow, is like, try to have dad and kid on a different level, or at least at a different position. Obviously if you're the head coach and your kid's varsity football, you're not going to be like, I'll coach the JVs or you're the coordinator, but at least try to, shuffle some position groups around, and don't be directly coaching your kid every day. Cause that's, I think, Daniel, where you would run into that situation more than anything, it's the coach's kid.
And I've also seen dads that are like overly hard. That was my first, as a
Yes.
coach, my first year. We had a dad that the head coach refused to let him on the staff because he had already had an experience with him in the fall before in baseball, or excuse me, the spring before. And he'd already talked about how hard he was on his own son, like that, to where it was like detrimental to the kid's mental health, his physical ability to play. I mean, it was really bad. And even from the sidelines, it was the same thing. Like if he came to pick his kid up, it was so bad. And that kid absolutely could have been a monster of a player for us. But it was like dad just always had his thumb on him. And it just was very, very strange. And it's one of those, you see it, we see it now because, also we got some really good athletes. And it seems like sometimes these kids are going to 3 practices. They're going to my freshman, and they're going over to varsity, and then they're going home with dad, and dad is having another practice. And it's like they can't ever remember anything because terminology is not the same, on and on. So luckily I've learned some lessons there that, that's kind of my motto. You always take something away, and sometimes it's what not to do. And in that case, that's what I've learned a lot of. I look forward to good examples of how to have your own kid on staff.
That's the other deal too, Daniel, is as a fellow coach, sometimes when we see those situations happening, have a conversation with that guy that's just bearing down on their kid, because sometimes they don't realize they're doing it. I've had friends that were coaching their kids before that I worked with that was like, man, you ripped the crap out of, Blake today. What's going on? And sometimes you get caught up in the heat of the moment as a competitor, as a coach, and your expectations for your own children are high a lot of times. So, sometimes those guys do it inadvertently or do it without recognizing that they're being unusually harsh. And that's kind of your job as a friend and a fellow coach to help them find that perspective. And again, it's just be plugged in, be tuned in, and coaching your own kid is a really unique situation, and people are going to have different perceptions in how you handle it. The one thing I worried about is I didn't want my sons or any of my kids' peers to think that they were couldn't be themselves in the locker room. I didn't want them to view my kid as how he's just gonna go home and tell his dad whatever, blah blah blah. And I may have worried about that unnecessarily, but that was still a worry. I didn't want my job to affect his relationships with his peers. And I don't think it ever did, but I didn't really put him in too many situations to where he was in conflict, where he had to be the coach's kid. He was just another one of my players.
Yeah. Coach Tyrell Shelley down at Stillwell, he's a guy that I work with quite a bit now, and his son is a senior linebacker, and he's the linebackers coach. I think where he's really lucked out is that it's only his second year of coaching. So he's still in like learning mode. And so he's not going to go out there and rip his son anyway, because he's just a better guy than that. But the kid literally may have more coaching than what Tyrell has, right? He's been playing longer than he's been coaching. So I think their relationship's been really good because they can just go home and have those good open-ended conversations about football and what did I see and what's the game plan. So I can see how it definitely is not detrimental all the time. But, like you said, Coach, it just sometimes you can overly worry even. So, all right, on to the fun stuff. I say fun. This question is less about football, and if it is football related, that's okay. This question is just, what's the most difficult part about being a parent? So football or non, what was your most difficult part? And Coach Red will just let you go first tonight on all of them.
Man, out of all my kids, that, as it pertained to football, and I know that that's not your question. My middle son, I actually, when we moved to Lone Grove, I left behind in Marlow. So beyond seeing him every other weekend and all that stuff, having spending time in the summers, for the most part, his football career, I got to watch him play once in the state playoffs when he was a freshman. I got to coach against him as an opponent his sophomore, junior, and senior year. In his last game as a player, we actually beat their team out. So I ended my middle son's career as the opposing head coach, and I know family dynamics are different for all of us, and sometimes coaches have to make decisions on, I'm taking a job at this school and my son's going to that school, or my daughter's going to this school, and that's one of the toughest things as a parent to do what you need to do professionally and financially to help your family, but still support your children in whatever endeavors and that they pursue. And man, high school athletics, whatever sport, is one of those things, that opportunities that you don't get back, and you want to maximize and make the most of it. And as a parent, that was one of the toughest things for me, is to feel like occasionally there were opportunities missed in my kids athletic careers as they move through school. But my middle son Dalton, that was a tough one, but he turned out okay. Ended up being a deep snapper in college for a couple of years, and he ended up okay himself. But all three boys were unique and different, but just make the best of the situations, and always remember those kids need us as dads too.
The trifecta, the one that you
Yeah.
played for you, the one that didn't play, and the one that played against you. So that's
Yeah.
what a career, man.
Yeah.
Uh, Joe, what you've been doing it a little while now. So what's kind of one of the more difficult parts of parenting?
Well, I mean, the most difficult thing is, this is a human that has to be watched all the time. So that's probably and the only way to do that is to either expend your own hours or expend your money for someone else's hours. But I will say, we mentioned at the beginning that I'm with my son from 8 to 11 every morning, and I try to be home at least for a little bit. I'm there all day. That's the other thing, is I work from home, so I'm here all day on the days that I don't go to practice. If I go to practice, I try to be home before he goes to bed. If I don't go to practice, and I usually try to see him when he wakes up from his afternoon nap, and then I go to the gym or whatever. Usually I'm home before it either way. But and Daniel, this, well, you guys all know this, but because you have a kid around the same age, they change so fast, which is what I didn't realize. It's like every single day or every week at least, there's like a new thing, and they're kind of cool. Like, oh, today he did this. Today he flipped over his playpen because he wanted out, and that's what he did. He threw all the toys out. Daddy went to go run to the bathroom, and he jumped up on the side of it and flipped it, grabbed whatever book that he wanted, and walked it over to me when I got out. It's cool. So, there's a new word or there's something, and I'm very fortunate that I get to be there for that all the time, and I don't, miss it. I don't miss those little changes every single day. And I think that the most difficult thing about, if I wasn't in the situation that I'm in, and I'm very fortunate to be in the situation that I'm in, that time wise, I can adjust my schedule to be with him for that amount of time. Monetarily, we can handle that. So I'm very, very fortunate in those things that I don't miss that. And I think that would be one of the hardest things, would be missing out, especially at this stage where it's just so quickly changing, missing out on that. Now, what I don't get to miss out on is the dirty diapers and the tantrums and those kinds of, no one have really bad tantrums yet, but but yeah, I mean, I think that just if you this pertains to football, but this also pertains to someone who's just got, you know, a busy job and a busy schedule, is missing out on that stuff would suck.
Yeah.
I think my hardest part was being parenting has been almost self-inflicted, and my wife had to essentially tell me a year ago or more that she's the default parent, and that was because I struggle with balancing. You know, with football, I'm a little better, like getting, like I said earlier, get out of the office, get back to the house, but I'm still not great at coming home and like I'm gonna sit in the floor and play cars. My brain is constantly thinking about all the other stuff, and so I want to go get stuff done. I struggle with a little bit of pain from my military times, like laying in the floor, sitting down. Some of those things get uncomfortable and even painful at times, and so of course that pushes me away from them pretty naturally. Like I'm gonna not do that. Um, but in football season, it's football. It's I want to watch film, I want to break down, I want to analyze stuff, even when I'm sitting around the house. Now having one of the kids in my lap is not an issue. But if they want to go do, hey, daddy, come in here and watch, like you got about 10 minutes, my man. Right. And that's something that I don't like about the way that I have parented. It's just so it's been a big struggle, is just managing that time so that I heard something a couple of years ago and it said, you know, kids spell love Time. And I try to think about that a lot nowadays because it's a super weak point of mine. And I know that like Beckett's 5 and we can have really good conversations, and he's learning, like absorbing like a sponge. And you know, Liam is that age now where he can come and tell me what he wants, which is really cool. So I'm just having to be better about time management, and it isn't necessarily football pulls me away from it, because in off season it might be video games, it might be gardening, it might be you know, wanting to go hunting, whatever it is. It seems like there's always something that's my interest, and I have a really hard time of setting those aside. So that's been the hardest thing about being a parent for me, is just managing that time correctly. And then having to share my food because Liam thinks everything's his. All right, last question, then we'll get out of here. So what is your funniest parenting or kid story?
Well, I've talked about my oldest son who didn't play beyond his freshman year, and my funniest story probably involves him. We have an area coaches show in Ardmore that I would attend after on Saturday mornings, and while I was gone, our coaches back at the field house would, you know, pick up the field house, vacuum, copy tape, start watching film, and I'm walking in the field house from attending the coaches show that next year after my son stopped playing, and I'd tricked him into being our filmer that year. So he was actually filming our games, and so, you know, in most cases we turn the volume down on the films because the bands are, you know, giving you a headache and people are yelling at you how stupid you are. So I don't know what possessed the guys to have the volume up when they were watching film that next morning, but I come in and Coach Cunningham, Coach Beard are just howling. They're rolling, and I'm like, "What's going on? What's going on?" So they're like, "Get in here, Ridge. You got to listen to this." So I go in, and they're playing some clips back from the game, and the sound's up, and I can hear the band, da, 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 da. And then all of a sudden I hear, "Show me your boobies. Show me your boobies. Show me your boobies." So it took me a minute to realize what was going on, but my son had talked his girlfriend into setting up on top of the press box with him while he filmed the game, and evidently he was trying to behave inappropriately, and unfortunately she had better morals than he did. So I don't think that his request was fulfilled, but had to have a conversation with my son about his behavior while he was our filmer on Friday night. But that was definitely a good story that my staff thoroughly enjoyed, and it's still brought up occasionally.
That's pretty hilarious.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, Joe, what? That's gonna be hard to top. We should have made you go last.
I don't have. I probably flipping over the playpen, and then just looking at me like, "Look what I did!"
Like that's natural.
Yeah, it was just when he flipped it over and he got up and grabbed the book and was like, "Hey, I got out. Isn't that cool?" And I'm like, "That's awesome, great." That's another container that is no longer usable. Now I don't. It's he hasn't done anything super. Does lots of funny things, but I don't have a lot of funny stories yet. It's just daily ridiculous things that he's a big dancer, big loves dancing, and so that's usually that's an entertaining part of the morning, is to put on something that he will dance. Very He's got a lot of moves. Got a lot of moves.
Just
But
tell
no,
him
I mean,
never lose that, right?
huh?
If you could just walk into the dance hall or whatever and pull those moves off, like you're fine. But we all
Yeah,
get so
no, it'd be,
embarrassed, we
yeah,
grow out of
like
it.
everybody thinks he's a great dancer right now, and I'm like, that's not gonna, those moves are not gonna work at your prom. So you might want to continue to refine those moves over the coming months and years. A lot of the things that will probably be funny later on aren't right now, like when he's covered in, everybody has the picture of their kid covered in spaghetti, and it's like, oh, look at him, and it's like, no, I'm the one who's got to wipe him down, clean him up, and give him a bath or whatever, and it's like, oh, this isn't funny at all. These things will be funny one day. Right now, he's feeding the dog all of his food, and yeah, so.
Yeah, so mine are still at that age too. We've not had the absolutely. I mean, we've had a few just little things, but Beckett has a long time been a snitch. He will tattle so fast, and he'll call you out on stuff. So like, I pick up my phone when I'm driving, and he's like, "Daddy, why are you texting and driving? Like, you're gonna kill us." Right? And I'm like, "All right, man, you're right. You're right. All right. I won't touch the phone." But he told on my wife one time for driving with her knee to her parents. So that was a pretty good one.
That's a good one, yeah.
He also has been the one that's been unafraid to pee wherever he's at. Once he got control of that, he was like, "Nope, wherever." And so she was picking him up from daycare one time, and here in Jay's, just the one we're using at the time, is a house that they've just changed and made it into a daycare with multiple rooms. He just whips it out on the front porch. All right, I gotta go, and he's just kind of just so beat up, which we would 100% do at the house. Like, that's not a concern, but he's been that way, like Walmart parking lot. Like, I'm just gonna pee right here. Like, all right, man, we got to get control of the places you go pee. Liam has had he is a daredevil, and so a lot of his funny stories are just what he jumps off of, and he will jump off of absolutely anything. It does not matter. And then when you're like, "Oh my God, he's broken something," he pops up again. So his daredevil.
They're incredibly
moves. Durable. Yes,
really
yes,
are.
They are. Yeah,
you're like, that had to hurt. And he's like, "Nah, okay."
Yeah. So Liam's daredevilness. I mean, from the time that he could walk, he had like a little electric 4-wheeler that's for tiny kids. And the first time he ever sat on it, he sat there for like maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then he was standing on the seat, like balancing. Look at me. So he's literally been a daredevil his entire life, and I fear where it's going to go, because I've always had common sense to not do dumb stuff, and I'm not so sure that he's going to have that natural fear. So we'll just kind of have to see. But
I will say the one funny thing with my son that popped into my head is he's very tall for his age. He's slowing down a little bit, but he's been most of the time been 98th percentile or whatever. And so once he learned to walk, which was this summer, he would at the pool walk up to the girls that were his height and throw it at them, talk to them, and well, they're like 3. so they would just like walk away from him very annoyed with this baby. And the sadness, first of all, the continued pursuit, and then the sadness when these girls would just like ghost him is incredible. And I'm like, get used to it now, because this
doesn't end.
It never ends. And the more you can deal with it, the better off your teenage years will be, because we go ahead and get rejected by all the older women right now, all of them, because it's not going to stop. But eventually one of them says yes. So keep it up.
Yeah, one of them does. They mess up and they say yes.
One of them eventually gets caught.
Oh man. All right, gentlemen. Well, We've came. We've told our good stories, talked the good talk. We'll pay the bills, and we'll start getting out of here. If you want to hear something that isn't just funny parenting stories, you want to talk football, you can jump over to join.joedanielfootball.com. Get access there for $1. It's 7-day trial, unlimited. It's everything in the package is there. Whatever level you buy into, you get everything in that package. So if you want to go platinum, you get 1 week of game film analysis on the house, so to say, in your trial period. So you can give that a try and see what Joe and Colin and the guys send back to you. I don't do that yet, so you won't have to hear me talk there. 4 defense packages there, the 4-3, 4-2-5, 3-3 stack, and 3-4. You also get the pistol power offense, which is a very balanced. The last season we talked about attacking all these defenses and running pro and spread and single wing. You can do all that. You can do any of that with the pistol power offense. So it doesn't matter what system you want to run, jump over and take a look at that. Chalkboard forums, go in, ask your questions. Maybe one of the most valuable things. The longer I'm on the website, the more I'm like, man, I can just go search how people did. How do you handle 4 verts with cover 3? Whatever it is, right? You just go and then see everyone's responses. Way less dramatic than Facebook and more informational. So if you just need something to scroll, there you go. Chalk Talks are weekly while we're in season. December, we're taking off. And then January, we get back to the bi-weekly schedule. And of course, game film analysis, like I said, if you go in at the platinum package, platinum level, you could send your film in, let Joe and the guys not break it down, I won't say that, but they will help you identify what's going wrong. So if it's the third quarter, you're just bad, come back at half, maybe we can take a look and see what you're doing after halftime. If it's the middle 8, we can check that out. If you can't close out games, we can see what's going on